Hey, what's up? What's going on? Welcome to another episode of English with Dane, a show designed to improve your English. As always, I'm your host, Dane, and you can find me on Instagram and Twitter at English with Dane. Today's episode is a special one-off bonus episode. While I figure out the ins and outs of Season 2, I thought I'd put out an episode and use it to introduce a new segment that will include stories from different people I know. Since it's the first time, I figured I'd get the ball rolling and share one of my stories. This is a story I told a long time ago when I had a different show, so most of you will be unfamiliar with it. I decided to tell it on English with Dane because not only do I think it's a good story, but it will also give us the opportunity to look at some travel-related vocabulary, which several of you have requested. But enough talking, let's just get into it. You are listening to a bonus episode of English with Dane. Hit it.
Breaking news this morning, the arrest of 12 suspected terrorists in England for plotting attacks using bombs and explosives. CBS News correspondent Elizabeth Palmer is in London this morning with the very latest on this story. Hey, good morning, Liz.
Good morning, Jeff. It was before dawn this morning when unarmed police officers went out in 3 cities here in the UK, in London, in Cardiff, and up in Stoke-on-Trent, arrested these 12 men, quite young, between 17 and 28 years old. And there's early reports, anyway, although they're still unconfirmed, say they were involved in a plot to detonate multiple bombs.
In 2006, I traveled to Florida from Madrid to visit one of my best friends from my days in Lima, Peru. As many of you know, I grew up in a few different countries: Peru, the United States, and Spain. Lima, Maryland, and Madrid, to be a bit more precise. During my time in Lima, I met some great people, one of which was my friend Juan Andres, or Juana as I called him. His mom is a friend of my mom's from school, and it just so happened that her son and I were in the same class and became really good friends. We had a lot in common, and we spent a lot of time together playing music, skateboarding, drawing, etc. Fast forward 4 or 5 years, and I was 17 years old, living in Madrid, and my friend Juana and I had lost touch a little bit. You know how it is at that age, and Facebook wasn't popular yet. It would still be a few years until Facebook became a standard tool to keep in touch. So what we had was MSN Messenger, and that was pretty much it. But even then, we didn't keep in touch. So we hadn't spoken in a few years, but then one day he called me out of the blue, and we ended up talking, terminamos hablando, for more than an hour. He told me about his life in Peru after I left, and then his new life in Florida. I shared stuff about my new life in Madrid, etc. He suggested I go visit him in Florida, and after talking to my parents, and then our parents talking amongst each other, we decided it would be a good idea. Huge shout out to my parents, by the way, for making that possible. So we planned the trip. We chose dates, went online to look for tickets, and finally the trip was ready to go. I would arrive there late July, early August, and fly back around the 8th or 9th, I believe. I would stay with my aunt first in Miami the first few days, and then I would go up to Boca Raton to spend some time with my buddy Juana and his family. It was a great trip. We reconnected right away and had a great time. He introduced me to his friends, we went to the beach, we went wakeboarding, we went to Universal Studios and rode some roller coasters, etc. Super fun trip. But all good things come to an end, and it was time to head back home. I got all of my things ready, and we headed to the airport 3 hours early, just like my parents have always preached. My itinerary was Miami, London, London, Madrid. So in other words, my return ticket was not a direct flight. I'd have to navigate through Heathrow and catch my connecting flight. No problem, I thought. I have enough time to get to my gate. Little did I know something was happening in London at the time. Something that would change the entire safety protocol for airline travel around the world.
At 2 a.m. this morning, the Joint Terrorism Analysis Centre raised the UK threat state to its highest level, critical. This is a precautionary measure. We are doing everything possible to disrupt any further terrorist activity. This will mean major disruption at all UK airports from today.
So after 10 hours, I landed in London, Heathrow. The only thing I was thinking was, okay, as soon as you get off the plane, look for the signs for connecting flights and navigate through the airport and get to the gate. If you don't see any signs for connecting flights, go to the help desk or the information desk and ask whoever is there. No problem, you got this. It was the first time I was really traveling alone in my life, so I was a bit nervous about missing my flight, not having some important document or whatever. But I also thought to myself, nah, that won't happen. You're just a little bit nervous, but it will be okay. You'll be home in no time. But then I landed at Heathrow, and everything changed. Worst case scenario. Here's how I remember it. As we're getting ready to get off the plane, an announcement comes on and says that Heathrow is collapsed and a bunch of flights have been canceled, han sido canceladas. So right away, I start kind of freaking out inside. I start thinking, oh my God, what am I going to do? I'm going to miss my flight. I'm going to have to stay in London. I don't have a visa. Who do I know in London that I can call? All of these things were going through my mind. Anyway, I get my carry-on from the overhead compartment and I make my way off the plane. But as I get to the door of the plane and the flight attendant says, bye-bye, thank you for flying, blah, 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 I ask her to point me in the right direction. She says that this is an exceptional circumstance and that I should find someone at a help desk. So at least I was right about that. So I get off the plane and I'm walking through the jet bridge, which is that movable connector that extends from the gate to the plane, and it's taking ages for people to move. I try to look over people's heads to see what's happening, but I can't really see anything. After about 15 minutes, we finally get to the gate, and I remember not being able to believe my eyes. I was in shock. The gate was packed full of people. The whole area was collapsed. I could barely move because of the amount of people. It was the worst. People were waiting to board planes, others were trying to get to baggage claim, and others, like me, were trying to catch a connecting flight while also trying not to panic. I remember looking around to see if I could find a help desk, and once I did, it was really difficult just to physically get to it. I fought and pushed my way through a sea of people, and I was finally able to talk to a really nice woman who seemed to be having the most stressful day of her life. It was a stressful time for everyone involved. I asked her what was going on, and she basically told me that they were redirecting passengers out of the airport and then back in. So we all had to leave the airport and get in this really long line to get back in. I was now really nervous about there being some issue with my passport, no visa, etc. I didn't know what to do, so I followed everyone that was on my flight and we left the airport together. After waiting in line for an hour or so, we got back into the airport. I found my way to the airline desk and waited again while they solved other passengers' issues. They were actually quite fast and helpful considering the situation. They put me on another flight and told me to go to the gate as soon as possible. And this is where things really got interesting. So if you haven't figured it out by now, I flew the same day or just after the 2006 transatlantic aircraft plot was foiled. To foil, spelled F-O-I-L, means to stop something, usually something undesirable or considered wrong, from happening. So if you don't remember, the 2006 transatlantic aircraft plot was a terrorist plot or plan to detonate liquid explosives carried on board airliners traveling from the United Kingdom to the United States and Canada, disguised as soft drinks, as Coca-Cola or Sprite or whatever. Now, the reason the airport was collapsed is because until that moment, nobody had ever tried to use liquid explosives to blow up a plane. Up until then, airport security only checked for weapons, drugs, and conventional explosives, let's say. But once the plot was discovered and they realized they were planning on using liquid explosives, everything had to change. Entire new safety protocols had to be quickly written and approved. New safety protocols that took into account, que tomaran en cuenta, that liquids were now a threat, una amenaza. Think about how crazy that is, though. I looked it up, and a plane lands or takes off every 45 seconds in Heathrow. That's around 213,000 passengers per day. I'm sure a vast majority of these passengers were carrying some form of liquids. Not just soft drinks, but saline solution for people with contact lenses, colognes or perfumes, makeup-related products like creams, gels, etc. Here's a short audio clip from a documentary I found on YouTube that features one of the main people in charge of writing this new protocol.
We couldn't talk to the airline industry or the airport industry. We literally had to bring less than a handful of people into a room, get a secure laptop, and type up the protocol that was going to change the entire processing for passengers getting on airplanes.
We were deciding whether to ban liquids, to perhaps ban carry-on.
So they couldn't speak to the airline industry nor the airport industry because it was extremely sensitive information, and divulging it or spreading it could have serious consequences. So they decided that passengers traveling from Heathrow would only be allowed to take a very limited selection of items in terms of carry-on luggage. Check this out. We were only allowed to take a transparent plastic bag with our passports, our boarding pass, and money. That's literally it. Notice that I did not say mobile phones. Anything electronic or that relied on batteries was strictly forbidden. So I was standing in line, ready to board, thinking the worst part was over, when a few members of airport staff approached the line of passengers with a big trash bag and a bunch of small, transparent Ziploc bags. They came up to me and said, "Hi, sir. Unfortunately, because of the nature of the situation, we cannot allow you to board the plane with anything that isn't your travel documents and money." I couldn't believe it. They gave me a plastic bag and told me to put those things in the bag and that anything else would have to stay at the airport. They asked if I had a phone, and then they told me to leave it there. They told me that if I wanted to, I could leave the gate and find a way to send it to Madrid. But at this point, the thought of missing another flight was unbearable, and I knew my parents would be worried sick waiting at the Madrid airport. So I told them they could keep it. It was the Nokia 2720, for those of you interested, the little black flip phone. I asked them if I could at least take the SIM card and take it with me, to which they said no. They told me to leave that too. I was upset, but at the same time, I understood they wouldn't ask something so unreasonable if there wasn't a really good reason. One passenger behind me really lost his cool. He became super angry or irate when they told him he wouldn't be able to board the plane with his phone, laptop, and car keys, and if he wanted to keep them, he would have to send them by mail and take a different flight. But here's the cherry on the cake. I was told I couldn't travel with my book. At the time, I was reading a book for school called Black Boy, written by Richard Wright. I told them it was just a book, a few pieces of paper that I had to read for school, and they did not care at all. They said, "I'm sorry, sir, but we cannot let you board with anything that isn't your documents, boarding pass, and money." So not only did I have to leave my phone and SIM card, but I had to throw away my book. I still have the memory of walking over to a man with a plastic bag and throwing my book in it, then walking back to the line and boarding the plane. Honestly, I don't think I even cared that much at the time because I just wanted to get on that plane and go home. I had had enough. I had been at the airport for like 6 hours and I just wanted to get home and get back to normal life. The one positive thing was that the plane was practically empty. I had a whole row, una fila entera, to myself, and as soon as the plane took off, I took off my seatbelt and laid down. I was so tired, so exhausted physically and emotionally that I fell asleep as soon as my head touched the seat. The next thing I remember is being woken up by a flight attendant telling me we were going to land and that I had to sit up and put on my seatbelt. Once we landed in Madrid, I got my bag from baggage claim and made my way out. I saw my parents and I gave them the biggest hug. It didn't even occur to me how horrible this was for my parents. Imagine going to pick up your son or daughter from the airport and realizing that they're not on the flight. You can't reach them because they don't have a phone and you don't know what's going on. But not only that, they're not on the next flight either. My mom told me that she went to the airline counter and demanded some information about the situation, but that the people working there told her they weren't allowed to give her passenger information. My mom argued with them, but once she told them I was underage, they were more flexible, more lenient, and they told her that I would be on the next flight out of London. So out I came, looking like an idiot because I was wearing these light blue pajama shorts with beer bottles on them that I bought in Florida, thinking they were super cool, and with a plastic bag with my passport in it. We got in the car and I told them everything that happened. They couldn't believe it either. We then went home and found out what happened. We learned that the British police had been surveilling, había estado vigilando, siguiendo, these men for weeks, following their every move, and once they had enough evidence, they moved in and arrested the men who were suspected of carrying out this terrorist plot or plan. Crazy. To this day, it is still one of the most stressful moments of my life, and I don't think I've ever been happier getting off a plane than I was that day. I showed up with a big smile on my face and again gave my parents a huge hug. I guess now it's just a funny story to tell at dinner parties that I can laugh at, but man, it was the worst. All right, before we finish this bonus episode, let's take a look at some of the vocabulary from the story. First, let's start with a few expressions that I used early on. The first one, it just so happened. The sentence was, it just so happened her son and I were in the same class. This is a way of saying that it was a coincidence. It just so happened that, and then the rest of your sentence. The next one is out of the blue. The sentence was, but then one day he called me out of the blue and we ended up talking, terminamos hablando, for more than an hour. So without warning or unexpectedly. Then we have to pick up where you left off. The sentence was, we thought it would be a great idea to see each other again and pick up where we left off. In other words, to continue or resume from where you stopped. Now let's take a look at some of the travel-related words, or airport-related words really, that I used during the story. You may know most of these because most airports have signs in English, but just in case, let's take a quick look. The first one is itinerary. The sentence was, my itinerary was Miami, London, London, Madrid. So a route or a proposed route for a journey. A direct flight. This one is very straightforward. So a flight without a layover. A layover is a short stop in a journey typically associated with traveling by plane. The next one is connecting flight. Also very straightforward. A flight that you take departing from said layover. Then we have gate, which is the area in which you wait to board the plane after you've passed security. Then we have carry-on, the bags that you carry with you onto the plane, that you put in the overhead compartment, which is the area above the seats where you put your carry-ons, right? Then we have jet bridge. We covered this one in the episode, but to recap, it's the movable connector that you use to get on and off the plane. Then baggage claim. This is the area in which you retrieve or get your luggage that you checked before the flight, right? The area with the baggage carousel. Then we have the word row, so the horizontal divisions of the plane, right? Una fila. Then we have help desk or counter. This is where you go to request information or assistance in an airport, typically from the airline you are traveling with. You can say, I walked over to the Delta counter, for example. All right, I think that's pretty much it. I think that pretty much covers it. I hope you found my story at least somewhat interesting or entertaining, and I hope I helped you with some airport and travel related vocabulary, as well as some new expressions. Season 2 of English with Dane will start the first week of December, and I'll let you know the specific day on Instagram, so get ready for that too. You can find me at English with Dane. All right, that's the show for today. As always, thanks for listening, and don't forget to subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or wherever you listen to the show. And remember, the best way to support English with Dane is to give it a 5-star rating on your favorite platform, and also by sharing it with friends, family, or whoever you think would enjoy the show. All right, thanks again. Talk soon. Bye-bye.